Week 9 in the books, everyone. That means another episode of the Fair Catch Podcast. I'm Gabe Caldern, and welcome to episode 4. So tonight on the show, I got a few interesting topics to discuss. I'm going to start off with my opinion on the current state of what the passing game and running games respectively look like in the NFL and how it's evolved into what it is today, and hopefully give some insight as to why I believe that's the case. Next up after that, let's talk Andy Reid and the Chiefs. Best team in football. Stay tuned for that. And for the final segment, I'm going to highlight two of the hottest teams in the NFL and talk in depth about the two top NFC frontrunners as they stand right now, and that's the Rams and the Saints. And as well, I'm going to talk about the game that the two played between each other last week down in New Orleans. So let's jump right in. Sunday recap. Week 9, Colts, Bengals, Giants, Eagles, Cardinals, and Jaguars all enjoying an afternoon off with the bye weeks. Thursday night game to get us started in Week 9, the Raiders scored as many points as Nick Mullins threw touchdown passes. Falcons in the blowout had fans leaving FedEx Field by the third quarter. The Lions up in Minnesota scored fewer points than times Matthew Stafford was sacked in that game. A hard-fought win in the Pittsburgh-Baltimore rivalry for the visiting Steelers. And another just miserable afternoon for the poor Browns fans at the Dog Pound. The Chiefs just steamrolled the Browns all afternoon. And an ugly, ugly game down in Miami. I mean, I got to be honest, forgot that even happened. Visiting Jets fell in that one. The Bears scored twice as many touchdowns on defense as the Bills did all game. Fitzmagic, the struggling Buccaneers, fell short again to the Carolina Panthers. Mike Evans, 1 catch on 10 targets. Chargers keeping the ball rolling with their 5th straight win in Seattle. And speaking of win streaks, we got 6 straight for the Houston Texans out in Mile High Stadium against Denver this last week. And the Saints knocking off the former undefeated Rams on a career day for Michael Thomas. Talk about that game in just a bit. And, not really to my surprise, the Titans doubling up on the Cowboys. 28-14 in a statement win last night in Dallas. The evolution of the passing game and, so to speak, the de-evolution of the run game. Okay, this has been something that has really been on my mind in recent years, and I've talked about it a lot with friends in depth about it. So I figured, why not express my opinion tonight on the show and just really give my reasoning, talk about my explanation as to why I view the passing game and running game as it is right now and what it means for the NFL moving forward. So when I say the current state of the NFL, I'm just really talking about how the passing game has elevated in ways we haven't really seen before. The league over the past few years or so is just really it's changed into this high-flying passing league where teams just really find themselves more often than not in a position to have to commit to the passing game in order to compete. And I think there's a lot of factors that have played a role in this new era of football, so to speak, such as several rule changes that have favored the offense over the defense. I mean, for instance, you look back 10, 15 years ago, receivers used to think twice about carelessly running routes across the middle of the field because of the fear of getting popped by the likes of Ray Lewis, Brian Urlacher, et cetera, et cetera. Rules have changed so much with hitting defenseless receivers, helmet-to-helmet contact, stupid pass interference calls, rules that, have invariably led to softer defenses and just more high-flying offenses, higher scoring games, more points. Fans love it. I don't, but a lot of fans seem to love it. This has not only affected defenses, right, and the overall game scripts of the average game, but in my opinion, I think that this has impacted both the running back position and the run game as a whole. And that's just, really what I want to talk about in depth today. Because the running game, is what always drew me to football as a kid. Every Sunday I'd wake up early, all excited to see these hard-fought yards on every run. Growing up, Sunday mornings watching Jerome Bettis, Jamal Lewis, Larry Johnson. Real, running backs, the definition of the position, guys that were molded, they trained every day of the offseason to get to that level of what was expected of a running back back then. They pounded the rock with authority every single game. It was physical football. I loved it. I miss those days. I mean, you guys look at Larry Johnson. of the Chiefs back in the day, he had over 400 carries. 400 carries back in 2007. I mean, every Sunday that year, he was getting 25 carries a game, hard-fought yards, and just you don't see anything remotely close to that anymore. You just really don't. You look back in the 80s, 90s, and, real early 2000s, and if you wanted to win a football game, you had to have a bell cow in the backfield, and nowadays you just don't really need that. So I just want to take a step back real quick before I really get into how the running back position and the run game has changed and what it has become, because I really want to highlight just how much the passing game has taken over the league in recent years. So since 2012, right, so that's the past 7 years of football, we've seen the highest completion percentage of quarterbacks in the history of the game. The most passing yards per game, the most passing touchdowns. And that's crazy, but so what does that tell us? All right, so for starters, right, it's without question that we've really seen an athletic surge of quarterbacks over the past 10 to 15 years. And that really stems from college. You look recently in college, you have a lot of offenses running these spread-type offenses that are run-first offensive schemes that involve these mobile quarterbacks who are just able to take over a game on the ground with their legs. You look back at Cam Newton at Auburn, you look back at Marcus Mariota at Oregon, there's this dynamic surge of these quarterbacks that are able to do what they can do through the air, equally on the ground. And it's slowly been trickling and transitioning into pro football play. Quarterbacks have just become more mobile. They're able to throw the ball downfield with more power and accuracy. And sure, okay, the defensive rules have changed, and they've also played a factor in the increasing success of the passing game. But I'm not going to be here and discredit or take away any of the skills that these quarterbacks possess. Okay, but offenses have become way more creative than ever before, really. I mean, we look back, Ronnie Brown, Ricky Williams. I'm sure a lot of people remember those guys, down in Miami. They introduced to us what we now know as the Wildcat offense. It's not seen as much in the league anymore as the go-to offensive scheme, but it sure as hell is great packages to run. You have New Orleans, you have Baltimore with Taysom Hill, Lamar Jackson. They run these kind of run-pass options, schemes, and they run it with success more often than not. It's definitely not a dependable source of offensive production, so to speak. You're not going to go into the offseason prepping, 4, 5, 6 months saying, okay, well, we're just going to stick with the Wildcat. But Ronnie Brown and Ricky Williams down in Miami that one year, they introduced to us something we've never really seen before, and it took the league by storm. It really augmented the running game to a point where it became very unpredictable and harder for defenses to stop. But, this Wildcat offense, I think, is really the birth of these more creative offensive schemes as a whole, and I'm talking about the passing game as well. And the big one that comes to mind that I mentioned before is the spread offense. Okay, and obviously it's used more so at the college level than in the NFL, but nonetheless, it's more relevant than it's ever been. Okay, and there's a lot of factors, I think, that play into this type of offense for a team, of course, to be successful with this, and why it's effective, when it's effective. And, first off, of course, the goal of this offensive scheme that has really come to fruition in the past couple of years is to stretch the defense. Stack multiple receivers on each side of the ball, spread the line, and you got to have a mobile quarterback who can run. This is a run-first offensive scheme with a mobile quarterback, and this run-pass option kind of offense has led to the usage of screen plays, screen packages becoming more widespread. They've become so deadly, and they're being used more and more by so many teams with versatile receivers, running backs that can play equally well as a receiver. Melvin Gordon, Christian McCaffrey come to mind. We're seeing these screen plays being utilized out of multiple offensive schemes, not just the spread. And it's really not limited by any one specific formation. Its success is determined, honestly, I think, by A, how athletic your receivers are, And, in terms of their blocking ability, growing up, I remember watching Hines Ward. All announcers could ever talk about was how, it was a hell of a blocker. He would get downfield, he would lay out DBs, set hard blocks. And, I think that blocking ability has really excelled the screen game to become what it is today. And, of course, agility and speed. All these receivers. I mean, you look in the past couple of years, these wide receivers 40 times at the combine, it's ridiculous. Look at John Ross, man, ran a 4.22. So receivers are just becoming more athletic as well, and that's playing such a, vital role in the screen game as a whole. So I truly believe that the increase of screen packages used by NFL offenses, this is kind of opinionated. I haven't done, it'd be really hard to do the research to back this up, but I believe it's inflated the overall passing game numbers for quarterbacks over the years. And honestly, I'll continue to stand by that belief, but that's just really a hunch, more so of an opinion. It's hard to back up. You'd really have to go at every single game log, and that's just tough. But anyway, there's so many other factors that go into why I believe the screen game has been so successful. And one of my theories with the evolution of the screen game over the years and the multiple variations becoming harder and even harder to defend against, such as jailbreak screens, bubble screens, slip screens, is that one, defenses are just simply tired, which I'll back up my reasoning for that in just a moment, but I want to give my second reason. My second reason is that the more complex offenses are becoming and the schemes that they're running are just simply outdueling defenses. It's resulting in a more high-scoring league that the statistics back up and prove year and year again, and just more yards per drive than ever before. And like I was saying in the beginning, this has developed into this high-flying offense. You look at the Tom Brady's, the Aaron Rodgers, the Andrew Lucks, the Matthew Staffords. It's just an air the ball down the field type of game. I think the Colts right now lead the NFL in passing attempts per game. I think it's just about 43. I'm going to talk about that later on. But it's exciting to see. As a fan, it's more fast-paced. You have a lot of deep balls being thrown. You have all these quick underneath routes that are being run, catch and run plays, these, interesting, complex offensive schemes. It's becoming, from a fan's perspective, more interesting to watch, but I truly believe that this has had a negative impact on the traditional running game. So now my reasoning for my first theory when I was talking about defenses are just simply tired, right, is they're just not getting enough time off the field to rest. Okay, so I want to compare the current year in the NFL right now, the 2018 season that we're in, to 15 years ago, back in the 2004 season. Now, before I go into this real quick, I just want to, remind everybody, guys, football is a game of inches. Every half yard, every yard means something. Every second left on the clock means something. Every down. So I want to take the top 10 offenses from 2004 and the top 10 from this year. And now the top 10 offenses from this year right now are far outperforming the top 10 teams from 2004 on an average by over 6 yards per drive, more points per drive, and almost two more plays run per drive. Now, okay, right? At first glance, it really doesn't seem like a lot and probably looks like, more of a stretch to try to use these stats to back up my theory. But honestly, you got to think about this as well, right? Offenses have more of a convenience than defenses do. And I say that in the sense that you can run the same screenplay with your number 1 receiver that you can run with your number 5 receiver. Okay, defenses don't have the luxury of subbing off their top defensive backs and linebackers as often as offenses can move their receivers at will to ensure whoever's getting this type of, drawn up screenplay is at 100%. And these defenses, they, like I was saying, they just don't have the luxury of taking their highest paid defensive back, their captain on defense, middle linebacker. You just can't take these guys off the field. In just pivotal situations, 3rd and 8, but your defense has been gassed all day. You can't take these guys off the field. And the offense has much more of a luxury at subbing on and off at will with no real crutch being added to their offense. They're not really being affected by it in the screen game, as so much so as, more traditional route running with your XY, receivers like that. So it's just really interesting to see it. And when I watch this, I always hear announcers talk about this too. The defenses just look gassed. See these offensive players trotting out on the field, barely broken a sweat. They have time to rest. Sometimes on run plays, you have receivers lined up. They don't have to run down the field 40 yards on a deep route. They might just run a little 5 and slant and just stop and just set up a block or something. So, I think that, it's an interesting point to bring up, and I just wanted to talk about that. In 2004, okay, there was 31 pass attempts per game by quarterbacks. Compare that to almost 36 a game this year. That's almost 5 more pass attempts per game, okay? And right now in the NFL this year, the top 10 rushing teams are only averaging 29 rush attempts per game. And it's really important to highlight, and I want to mention this, that 5 of those top 10 teams have quarterbacks known to carry the ball a lot and rack up good yards. And that inflates the carries per game statistic by a lot. Okay, you look at Chicago, they're top 10 rushing in the league right now. Mitch Trubisky. You look at the Carolina Panthers, Cam Newton. Okay, Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson. You got guys that are quarterback, and this goes back to what I was saying before. You're having these more athletic quarterbacks that have been brought up in this new era of college-style offense that is just, taken over by storm. Now, I want to flip it up real quick and kind of get back on track to what I really wanted to talk about, and that's the running game and the running back position in its current state. Okay, now, so statistics show that teams can still be successful without the presence of a run game. We all know that very well. Okay, everyone knows, though, that having a run game is just absolutely essential to achieve a well-balanced dual-threat offense that keeps defenses having to respect the threat of a run as equally as the threat of a deep pass. Okay, so when you think of a run game for any NFL teams, there's 2 options. There's only 2 options. Either have a running back by committee approach, okay, which I hate personally. I can't stand that. Okay, running back committee approach, usually have 2 backs that are equally splitting carries and time on the field for different packages. And you usually, more often than not, have a third running back that comes in for more specific packages as the other 2. More so for short yardage stuff, goal line carries, 2-minute offenses, to add a receiving threat out of the backfield. Okay, you look at Cleveland, first few weeks of the season, before Carlos Hyde was traded, you had Carlos Hyde was getting the primary workload, getting the ball carries on the ground. You had Nick Chubb, who would come in and relieve him for a few carries a game. And then you had Duke Johnson, who would come in as strictly a receiving threat out of the backfield. All right? Now you got your bell cow running back. And this is what I think traditional running game is. The primary workhorse, your every down back. The guy you're giving 20-plus carries to and utilizing in the pass game and riding his coattail for the whole damn game. All right, so let's talk about a few running back by committees right now in the NFL. And the biggest teams that come to mind right now are the Miami Dolphins, the Detroit Lions, and the Tennessee Titans. Okay, so Detroit, prime example of a running back by committee approach to the run game. They got 4 running backs on their rosters that get in the game. Okay, you got Kerryon Johnson, LeGarrette Blount, and Theo Riddick is the main trio. Amir Abdullah, not so much. So let's look at the first 5 weeks, right, for the Lions before Theo Riddick was sidelined with an injury. Of the 3, of this trio of the running back by committee approach for the Lions, you got Kerryon Johnson, rookie, leading the way on the field for about 15% more plays than Theo Riddick and around 30% more than LeGarrette Blount. So you have these 3 running backs, right? And they're only utilized for specific situations. You got Kerryon Johnson. As the numbers show, right, he is the primary rusher. You can't deny that. He's the primary rusher who is used every game to establish a run game and keep the offense balanced. as LeGarrette Blount snap count honestly suggests, and from watching games, and I don't know why I've subjected myself to watching the Lions play, but he's mostly used in short yardage and goal line situations. Outside of that, there's no use for the guy. Okay, whereas Theo Riddick is the James White, as James White is to Tom Brady in that Josh McDaniels, complex offense. That's what Theo Riddick is to the Detroit Lions. He's used in these 2-minute drills. He's used primarily, just like Duke Johnson, James White, as a receiving back. In the screen game, and primarily, again, like I said, strictly used as a receiving back. You will rarely see any of those backs get more than 5 carries a game unless they're just so short in depth at the running back position. Like James White this last week, I think he got like 10 or 12 carries. But, of course, that's because Sony Michel is out with injury. And you got a wide receiver, jack of all trades, Cordero Patterson, trying to pound the rock. All right? So, although this running back by committee approach defies, in my opinion, the conventional run game approach, in my opinion at least, right, I don't think it's necessarily a bad approach if used correctly, though. And I think it's hard to use this correctly. I think that it becomes a problem, though, when getting any of these running backs into a rhythm. And we all know how important getting in a rhythm is in football. It's like any sport. Pitching in baseball, shooting threes in basketball, whatever the case may be. And I think teams are just much more successful in the run game when they use a primary every down back, who is the bell cow, the workhorse. All right, so let's look at some examples as to why I believe having this primary back is just, oh my God, it's far superior. It's just such a far superior approach to the running game. And right now this year, you got 3 of the top 4 teams in rushing yards per game. The top 4 all use a primary back, with the exception of Seattle, who I was thinking about talking about, but they just recently inserted Chris Carson into the primary role. But in games in which Chris Carson was out, you had Mike Davis carrying the ball 25 times a game. All right, so of these 3 of the top 4 teams, in order, you got the Rams, Panthers, and Cowboys leading the way in rushing yards. Okay, so listen, those numbers are a tiny bit skewed, not so much for the Rams, but the Panthers and Cowboys, because of quarterback rushing for both the Cowboys and Panthers, much more so the Panthers with Cam Newton. But it doesn't take away from how well utilized their running backs are. Right, so when you look at these 3 teams, it really comes to no one's surprise that these primary backs are these teams are virtually never splitting carries with another back that would otherwise interfere with their rhythm. It just doesn't happen. You got Todd Gurley of the Rams, Christian McCaffrey for Carolina, and Zeke Elliott down in Dallas. And the thing that sets them apart from most running backs. And I want to make notable mentions real quick to James Conner, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, Melvin Gordon, and Joe Mixon, respectively. And Marlon Mack on the up and coming, by the way. Watch the Colts this week. Going to be a big game for him. They're all workhorses in their own right, but for argument's sake, and for the sake of the length of the episode, I just wanted to take the top teams in rushing. The guys that everyone talks about when you look at the stats, leading rushers in the league, leading rushing teams in the league. You see these guys up there. So it sets them apart. It's very simple. It's their involvement on every down of a drive. Utilizes blockers, ball carriers and receivers, right? So this, trifecta, okay? Saquon Barkley, New York Giants, perfect example. Every down back, okay? He's a great blocker in the passing game, tremendous on the ground carrying the ball, and he has 9 catches in each of the last 3 games. I mean, a primary back has to possess all 3 of those skills in order to be a complete back. And of all the guys that I've mentioned, Saquon, Kareem Hunt, Zeke Elliott, Todd Gurley, all those guys have those skills, 100%. There's no questioning that. And, this just really gets me going because I cannot figure out why teams just don't stick with a primary back approach. Okay, I'm not playing. I don't understand it. It's every week I got to see this stuff with this running back by committee garbage, and I think it has to either be the coaching philosophy or the fact These kind of just exceptional running backs and their talent is extremely hard to come by. I don't know if teams understand the talent they have and say, all right, we have to go with a running back by committee approach. Or if they say, hey, yo, this guy's a beast. This guy's a monster. Let's only take him off the field when he needs to catch his breath. That is the mindset I think teams need to have. Screw all this running back by committee garbage. All right, I really find it interesting as to why teams go with one approach as opposed to the other, and never really, it's either, there is no middle ground with these two run game approaches. There is no, okay, 1 week we'll give this guy 30 carries, and the next week we'll split 10-10-10 across 3 running backs. Because it seems to me, when teams have multiple backs used for specific purposes, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a lot easier for defenses to recognize and make adjustments accordingly. They say, okay, hey, we got this guy coming in. We've seen, footage from him all week. He's only used for these, rinky-dink slip screens or something along those lines, The point is, I feel it's much more predictable for defenses to contain. I think you're just limiting yourself on offense. But, when I watch the Steelers play or the Saints, they use James Conner and Alvin Kamara in every way, shape, and form. It just adds such a threat on offense when you have a running back that can get you 20-plus carries a game on the ground. And, hey, why not catch 5 passes and be in a rhythm all game long? I just don't understand it. I don't understand this Pete Carroll, coaching philosophy at the beginning of the year where it was Rashad Penny, Chris Carson, Mike Day. What was going on there? I don't understand what's going up in Detroit. Why do you have 4 running backs that are in a rotation? Primarily 3, but why do you have these 3 running backs in a rotation? Okay, you go down to Tennessee. Why is Derrick Henry stealing carries from Dion Lewis, who is, like we saw last night, Monday night, is clearly the better running back? I just don't get it. God knows what's going to happen to Jacksonville this week against Indianapolis, who have established a primary workhorse in Marlon Mack. You got Leonard Fournette, who hasn't played more than a half all year. You just traded for Carlos Hyde, and you got TJ Yeldon. What's going on there? Anyway, I'm going to move on to my next segment. Okay, and I'm going to talk about why I think right now, hey, Andy Reid, the Chiefs are the best team in football. To start the year, the Chiefs had 3 road games in a 4-game stretch. They opened up by steamrolling the Chargers by 2 possessions in LA. And the following week, hey, they traveled east to Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers. Then week 4, they had a primetime game. That was an awesome game, by the way, at Mile High Stadium, where they made a 2-score comeback midway through the 4th quarter to sneak out a win against Denver. The only loss coming that they had this year was to New England. That was a 43-40 game. Young Pat Mahomes playing against the GOAT in the GOAT's territory. Okay, so you can forgive him for that. That was a field goal game. And it wasn't like they had to make a comeback late. They kind of did, but for the most part, they were in the football game the whole evening. So it's easy to forgive the Chiefs for losing that game, okay? And, keep in mind, right now, the Chargers, Pats, and Steelers, respectively, are all top 10 teams in the NFL. Chargers are winners of 5 straight. Steelers, divisional win on the road last week, first place in the AFC North. Pats, first place in the AFC East. There's nothing to scoff at, these wins early in the year. With the Saints now, who are ranked number 1 in the power rankings by a lot of experts, following the win over the undefeated Rams, I want to highlight, their only loss of the year in comparison to the Chiefs' only loss of the year. All right, the Saints lost at home 48-40 in week 1 to the Buccaneers. Okay, sure, the Bucs got off to a hot start. Fitzmagic, talk of the town. But when you're giving up practically 50 points and a loss at home on opening night, it raises some eyebrows. Sure, it was week 1. All right, it's easy to forgive, But then you look at the following week, and this is what kind of, is still sticking out to me. They only beat a Tyrod Taylor. Let's say that again. Tyrod Taylor led Browns team by a field goal. And this was at home as well. And Browns didn't have Josh Gordon. And Tyrod Taylor, no Josh Gordon, down in New Orleans. New Orleans snuck out with a 3-point win. And they beat the Falcons. The Saints did the following week in overtime. And if you look back at these 3 games, I remember watching them. I don't remember them well enough in detail, but I remember the important stuff that Cleveland had a chance to win or at least tie. Unfortunate issues for them at the kicker position. And like I said before, they were without Josh Gordon. And Atlanta, and that game, they had an opportunity to win their game as well. So, when I take a step back and I'm analyzing the Saints, I'm looking at them, I'm saying, okay, everyone's saying they're the number 1 team in football right now. The Saints could have very, very easily have been 0-3 right now to start the year. And I think we would be talking about them in a completely different way had they did. But it's the NFL, right? A win's a win. So that's all I'm going to say about the Saints. I'm not taking anything away from the Saints. Great football team. I think they're top 3 team in the league without a doubt. But back to the Chiefs, okay? So the Chiefs' offense is it's really in its own plateau. It's has its own tier that doesn't really need to be discussed because we all know how explosive their offense is. They lead the league in points. They're 3rd in passing yards and total yards. And they've established. We get it. We get it. They are established, explosive, high-power offense. I mean, they're the only team right now in the NFL, by far, the only team in the NFL right now with 3 different receivers over 500 yards. 3 different receivers with over 500 yards receiving. And Kareem Hunt is on pace to join the club. Give him a few weeks. He's right there. But, when you look at the Chiefs, the problem is the defense. Okay, whenever you start talking about the Chiefs, hyping them up, oh, the defense sucks, second worst, defense in the league, right? And okay, they rank at least top 5 in basically every negative defensive category: total scrimmage yards against, yards per game against, and first downs against. I mean, it's pretty bad. I'm not denying that. But I think to the past few weeks, I think back there and I say, okay, they've been looking better on the defensive side of the ball, have they not? I mean, they've only given up 18 points on average a game over the last 3 weeks. And I really expect that to continue, with a visit from the struggling Cardinals on Sunday. I don't see the Chiefs giving up more than 13 points in that game. And the thing that sets the Chiefs apart from every other team in the NFL is that they have by far the most explosive weapons, explosive quarterback, all-purpose running back. And when you take all the top teams and you put all of their position players in a bottle, the Kansas City Chiefs one is the one that's going to be closest to being full. I mean, they just have too much damn talent on that team for them not to be considered the best team in football. You got Travis Kelce. You have Tyreek Hill. You have Sammy Watkins, who's emerging as a very, very dominant number 2 receiver. Kareem Hunt, who is on pace for a ridiculous year again. And then you got Pat Mahomes. All right, leading the league in passing yards. He's about to have 30 touchdowns real soon. Andy Reid. And listen, Andy Reid, we all know deep down, he doesn't care if his team's giving up 30 points in a game because he says, you know what, we're going to go out there and score 40. Okay, the Kansas City Chiefs, I think, are one of only 3 teams right now that can compete at a very high-level shootout kind of game. And the only other teams really that I would put in that category, I mean, we saw them play Sunday, the Rams and the Saints, and then you got New England. All right, so it's going to be very interesting moving forward to see how that AFC plays out. I think the Chiefs and the Patriots are going to be fighting for that number 1 spot. And then out in the NFC, which I don't want to give anything away for later in the episode, but Rams, Saints, maybe the Panthers. So we'll see. Now talking about our last segment, as said before in the show, Rams versus the Saints. Going to talk about their game that happened this last Sunday, and I just kind of want to talk about the Rams and the Saints in general, moving forward, where they stand in the NFL right now, what I look to see from them moving forward, and just kind of trying to project a few things, okay? Because that's fun. Why not, right? So let's start with the Saints, okay? I mean, listen, Alvin Kamara is making a very strong case for himself as being one of the best complete running backs in the league. And there's no argument there. He's already just a few yards shy of 1,000 total scrimmage yards, and he's already tallied up 12 total touchdowns on the year. He has half as many receptions as he does carries, 111 carries to 51 receptions, and this is a superstar in the making type numbers right there. All right, he's got the speed. He's got the strength, he's got the hands, and he's got the patience above all. Okay, I place patience running the ball above a lot of things. And in this past game against the Rams this last week, when he scored his first touchdown in the opening drive, it was a toss to the left side. It was around the 10-yard line. And when he started to turn the corner, I watched this play over and over again because, oh, man, it made me so happy to see someone running like this because I haven't gotten to watch Le'Veon Bell at all this year. I really hope Le'Veon Bell comes back. But anyway, when he started to turn that corner, there were 3 Rams defenders and only 1 offensive lineman there to set a block. And the patience, the elusiveness, to wait for a missed tackle, analyze the block being set by his offensive lineman, I thought it was remarkable. Like I said, these are the same kind of attributes Le'Veon Bell has, which made Le'Veon Bell the most talked about running back in recent years. My favorite running back to watch. All right? I mean, in this game between the Saints and the Rams, there was 28 points in the game already by the start of the second quarter. And hey, no surprise. It's what we expected on paper. 60-point over-under. A lot of offense, back and forth scoring. Barn burner, right? And whoever defense really came up big late in the game was going to win. I mean, that's usually how those scripts go, right? It's either that or whoever's fortunate enough to have the ball on the final drive of the game is going to win the football game. So both these teams, like I mentioned about the Chiefs before, the Saints and Rams, along with the Chiefs, maybe the Pats. Okay, there's a lot of interesting things developing in New England now. I don't know what's up with Sony Michel. I don't know if he's coming back this week. God knows if Gronk's going to play in the next few weeks. They got a game coming up. He's still iffy, but the week after that, they got a bye week. So they might be looking to sit him out this week. So where it stands now, I maybe put the Pats in there. Okay, but these teams have the ability to compete in these shootout kind of games more so than any other team in the NFL. And I think that puts them a tier above every other NFL team because of the state the NFL's in. This is a high-scoring league. There's been more touchdowns through this point in the year than there's ever been in NFL history. Now, unfortunately, I got to talk about Mark Ingram, fumbling on his first few carries of the game. Not on his first, he didn't fumble multiple times. I think it was like the second or third carry, something like that. He just coughed the ball up. This has to be a concern moving forward for the Saints. I mean, hey, he looked great in his return, week 5, after being suspended, I think, for PEDs or something like that. But after that, he's been a ghost. We haven't seen him much at all, and it's really just been the Alvin Kamara show. And not that that's a problem. I think we're going to start seeing the gap between these two players, their time on the field. Okay, I think we're going to start to see that grow a lot wider. Kamara's just going to start to, separate himself a lot from Ingram in terms of getting more playing time. And I think moving forward, this is just my prediction, Ingram is going to see a very reduced role in the offense. And the Saints are going to lean much more heavily on Kamara moving forward. As not only has he been producing more when his number is called, but I just think he's 10 times better than Mark Ingram in every aspect. I hope Sean Payton and the coaches realize this, and I think they do. I think they do. And and really only put Ingram in for specific packages and just not take away from Kamara's explosiveness, his ability to get in a rhythm, being, a very just exceptional check down option for Drew Brees, who can create stuff in open space. And just his, productiveness this season, his productivity, it's been there. If he doesn't do it through the air, he does it on the ground. 3 rushing touchdowns, earlier in the year against the Giants. 3 touchdowns, 2 in the air this past week against the Rams. I mean, this guy can do whatever he's told to do. And I think that they need to just hop on the Alvin Kamara train, ride the bandwagon all the way out to week 17 and into the playoffs. Leave Mark Ingram at the station. Maybe go back, pick him up for a few plays. But besides that, Alvin Kamara, this gap between their playing time needs to just grow more. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of watching Mark Ingram, who I've always believed is overrated, stealing, volume and potential production from Kamara. So we'll see what happens with that development down in New Orleans. So now on the other side for the Rams, Todd Gurley, okay? Now, he got off to a strong start on the Rams' first drive. Had a couple of nice runs. He ran for a rushing touchdown, broke out to the outside, about an 8-yard run, something like that. But after that, 13 carries for 68 yards. And what was more surprising to me was the fact that, and listen, he's been utilized in the passing game as much as any other running back in football, but he only had 6 catches for 11 yards on Sunday. 11 yards. Okay, he's been their X factor all year. And I said it last week. I was saying it, if there is a game for Gurley to slow up and come back down to earth, even just for one game, it would be this one. This game on paper was easy to see it, that it would not favor Gurley on the ground. The Saints are the first-ranked run defense, and this was a projected fast-paced barn burner, like I mentioned. So you would think that you would get it done through the air, right? And it just really didn't happen at all. And the absolute biggest part of the Rams' success this year has been Todd Gurley. And the first game, he was contained. They lost. All right? The Saints, in this game, they started to run, they were running away with it. This was a 35-17 game at half. Okay, but I'm going to tie this in with the whole passing game and why I think the Saints are a little, not overrated. I'm not saying they're overrated, but why I think the Chiefs are just a step above them is because the Saints, if there's only one weakness on this team, which there is absolutely only one weakness on this Saints team this year, and it's been their atrocious pass defense. They are the second worst pass defense in the entire league. That's worse than the Chiefs. I'm just saying. And, they try to make some adjustments. They acquired Eli Apple, to try to add more depth to their secondary. But I don't think it's helped much. I'm not seeing anything different. They still rank second. Like I said, they're giving up 310 yards passing through the air, which is second to whatever's going on out there with Marvin Lewis and the Bengals. And I can't go an episode without talking about Marvin Lewis, something that he's doing wrong. And they're giving up 320 yards passing a game. All right, they're not winning football games. They go into Kansas City a few weeks ago. Can't hold Pat Mahomes. They score 10 points on offense. That's ridiculous. The Bengals suck. The Saints play them next week. I hope the Saints light them up, beat them by 40. I hope this is the year that the Bengals front office wakes up and say, hey, you know what, Marvin? Thank you for everything you've done, but we're moving in another direction. The way the NFL game is today and how heavily relied upon the passing game is, there is no world where you are giving up over 320 passing yards a game and expect to win football games deep in December and doing something in the playoffs. You're just not. It's not happening. All right? They're giving up over 70% completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks. Both the Bengals and the Saints. It's just, they're not going to get it done. And this is what Sean McVay and the Rams knew going into Sunday's game against the Saints. This was going to be their approach. And it almost worked for them. Jared Goff was making a lot of great reads. He was getting good time in the pocket. Gurley was used a lot as a blocker on Sunday. And, he was making these accurate throws. And, I love this duo of a receiving core of Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks. It's fun to watch. Robert Woods getting all the underneath stuff while you got Cooks on the outside as your big play threat. Cooper Kupp, no slouch by any means as their number 3 receiver. And he had a great game on Sunday. It's really a great system that has come to fruition under the guidance of Sean McVay this year. I love this young team, young coach mentality, this work ethic that the Rams seem to have. And it's showing on the field. They have a running back to keep the offense balanced. And this is a scary, scary young football team with so much upside and potential for years to come. The Rams tied this game up while shutting out the Saints for the entire third quarter and half of the fourth. And this is so crucial. When you're playing on the road against, your top competition for the 1 seed in the NFL, in the NFC, not the NFL, in the NFC, is that there is absolutely no margin for error, especially for the type of blown coverage and just mistimed defense that happened when Michael Thomas just broke the game open with that 70-yard, reception. That sealed the game. That put Michael Thomas, career day for him, hats off to him. I think he had 12 catches, 211 yards, and a touchdown. Exceptional receiver. Just adds even more, offensive power to the Saints team. And he's going to be great, for years to come as well. And that was the game right there. It was nothing that the offense didn't do that cost the Rams the game. They had the right approach. They had the right game plan. They knew what they needed to achieve. They knew what needed to be done down in New Orleans in order for this to be a competitive football game. And that's what happened. Okay, so I think moving forward, both of these teams look obviously like the strongest contenders in the NFC. Okay, both with only 1 loss. But hey, right behind them, right, not too far down the block, you have the Panthers, who are only 1 game behind the Saints and still have 2 games versus the Saints left to play in weeks 15 and 17. I believe those games will have division winner implications written all over it. Those are going to be some exciting late December games. So between the Rams and the Saints, I think the Saints have the harder schedule, to be honest, moving forward. With 4 divisional games remaining, Atlanta, Tampa, 2 against Carolina. And next week, they got to travel to the jungle to take on the Bengals, which is going to be an interesting game, considering A.J. Green is out a few weeks with injury, and their speedster John Ross is really going to have to step up in his absence. The Bengals are going to look to somehow get Joe Mixon going early in this game against this top-ranked Saints run defense. If the Bengals, God forbid, they don't run the ball early and try to establish something with Mixon, who is more than capable of getting it done, take some pressure off Dalton having to force throws without, his top threat out there. God forbid they don't get this game going. This game's going to be over by the start of the second quarter. This is going to be a game where the Saints come out, they try doing something stupid, the Bengals on offense, similar to whatever Jason Garrett, Scott Linehan are doing down in Dallas. This garbage play calling, garbage offense. If the Bengals start doing Jason Garrett-esque, play calling and type of offense, Saints are just going to go 3 and out, thank you, touchdown, 3 and out, thank you, touchdown. This is going to be a 21-3 type of game, with a few minutes just gone by in the second quarter. I mean, this is going to be a very similar game to the Bengals-Chiefs a few weeks ago. If the Bengals can't control the pace of this game, they don't have to necessarily control it the whole way, but boy, they have to make an attempt this week. This is a big game for Cincinnati with Pittsburgh extending their lead in the AFC North. It's week 10 coming up. It's getting a little late in the year. You know, there's not really that much more room to be losing games and getting blown out. You don't have time to make adjustments on the fly anymore. You just don't. So I think, you know, the Bengals, like I was talking about earlier, worst pass defense in the NFL. So, man, I try to like the Bengals. I really do. You know, I love A.J. Green. I like Andy Dalton. Big Joe Mixon fan. I'm hoping John Ross has a healthy career moving forward. But this is going to be a bad game if the Bengals can't jump out on top early. So besides that, I don't think the Saints really have any tough games outside of that 3-game stretch close to the end of the year. You know, I think probably they have the toughest 3-game stretch of any football team in weeks 15, 16, and 17. Of course, like I said, having to play the Panthers twice, and then the Steelers in between those two meetings in week 16. Yeah, at least the Steelers game is at home, so I don't have to worry about, you know, the frigid temperatures or whatever the conditions are going to be like at Heinz Field late in December. But, you know, still, this is a tough schedule for the Saints. Okay, so now when I look at the Rams' remaining schedule, they close out the year in the last 3 weeks hosting the Eagles, and then they just get to lollygag around and beat up on the Cardinals and 49ers, which on paper it looks like a free 3 wins. And for me, really, the only 2 games that pop out to me on the Rams schedule moving forward is Week 11 versus the Chiefs. Warm Monday night game in L.A. at prime time. That's going to be great. That's in 2 weeks. And then late in the season, they got a matchup in Soldier Field against the Bears. That's in Week 14. So, you know, as far as my predictions go, to me, the way things are shaping up and the way things look moving forward, I think the Rams could finish this year at best 14-2, at worst 12-4, and I think they fall Monday night to the Chiefs, but they sneak out a low-scoring win in Chicago. And that's just my prediction for the Rams. And for the Saints, just more so this NFC South in general, I think it's going to come down to the Saints and Panthers fighting for the 2 seed, you know, late in the year. Those 2 games they still have to play against each other is going to have serious playoff implications, because whoever finishes second in that division is going to have to play on the road in a wild card game, despite most likely, and I would confidently say it, the 3rd best record in the NFC. You know, this is very similar what could happen to the Saints if they derail late in the year. Look what happened to them back in 2010. They finished 2 games behind the Falcons. You know, Saints went 11-5, and they had to take on the 7-9 Seattle Seahawks out in Seattle, and they got upset. You know, so I think there's a lot riding on those 2 games between the Panthers and Saints, because we all know the playoffs are a whole different atmosphere, and nobody wants to play on the road having such an incredible regular season run, potentially winning 12 to 13 games and having to play on the road at, let's say, a Chicago or Minnesota or at, well, I don't know, Washington. I don't think it is that tough of a place to play. Corny fans. They're not real fans in Washington. More so Minnesota, Chicago, environments like that. There's a little worry there. So I don't think you're going to see any ease up on the end of the Saints or Panthers in terms of, oh, okay, we've got, you know, this locked up, a playoff berth. No, they want to win the division. They don't want to play on the road. So there is a lot of competitive football left for the Saints, the Rams, and the Panthers, respectively. And I think in the NFC, those are the 3 teams to watch moving forward for the rest of the year. It's going to be a tight race. It's going to come down to Week 17 as far as seeding goes. No doubt in my mind, of course, they all make the playoffs. But as far as seeding implications go, it's going to come down to Week 17. And that really just wraps up the episode. You know, this was more of a opinionated kind of episode. I just wanted to get a few things off my chest, talk about, some things that have been on my mind in recent years, talk about some teams, Saints, the Chiefs, the Rams, and, just provide you guys with some insight, some reasoning for my opinions, and hopefully you guys found it informative. Hopefully you guys learned something or just found it enjoyable. It always gives me great pleasure to come here every Tuesday night and just hop on here, record for an hour, all weekend, just put together a cool episode that I can just talk about football for an hour after football Sunday is ended. God, Tuesday and Wednesdays have been the hardest days before I started doing this podcast to get through because there's no football. Thursday night football is that little tease. There's nothing on Friday. Saturday, you got college football. And then it's Sunday right around the corner. So this podcast is just awesome. I love doing it. I hope you guys are enjoying it and look forward for more episodes to come because they will be. So stay tuned, and thanks again for tuning in, guys.